Welcome to our story today. Millionaire sees his pregnant ex-wife cleaning tables at his wedding reception, but he really shocked. In today's captivating story, we delve into the unexpected twists of fate and the power of compassion. Our tale begins at a lavish wedding reception where a millionaire groom is celebrating his new chapter in life. Little did he know, the evening would bring a poignant reminder of his past and a chance to make a life-altering decision. As the guests enjoy the festivities, the groom's eyes fall upon a familiar face among the staff. It is his ex-wife, visibly pregnant, who is working tirelessly cleaning tables. The sight is both shocking and heart-wrenching, prompting a flood of memories and emotions. Their marriage had ended on a tumultuous note, but seeing her now, he is compelled to reevaluate the choices he made. The situation becomes even more complex as we learn about their shared history. Once partners in love and life, circumstances had driven them apart. Despite their differences, they shared dreams and plans that were left unfulfilled. The groom is faced with a moral dilemma. Should he reach out to the woman he once loved or continue with his new life, leaving the past behind? As the evening unfolds, viewers are taken on a journey through the groom's reflections. Each moment with his ex-wife reveals the depth of their past connection and the reasons for their separation. The story explores themes of love, loss, and redemption, challenging us to consider the impact of our actions on those we care about. In a surprising turn of events, the groom makes a decision that could change both their lives forever. What he chooses to do may not only alter his future, but also provide hope and healing to someone who once meant the world to him. This encounter serves as a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments can lead to profound personal growth. Inform us if you are enthusiastic about this narrative. If you are, press 1 if you found the video to be enjoyable. If this is not the case, press 0. Your comments are a great source of motivation for me to collect more stories that are uplifting and meaningful.
6 months after his lavish divorce, millionaire Daniel Carter's world stopped when he saw his pregnant ex-wife, Elena, working as a waitress at his wedding reception. Who was the father of her child? The truth that unfolded would leave everyone stunned and force Daniel to confront the choices that had shattered them both. Daniel Carter and Elena were the kind of couple others admired. They had built their life together from scratch, defying the odds. College sweethearts, their love story was rooted in mutual support, laughter, and late nights filled with dreams of a better future. Elena had been Daniel's anchor during his toughest years, sacrificing her own ambitions to ensure his success. She worked tirelessly to support them financially, while Daniel poured everything into his fledgling business. A risky venture that often seemed doomed to fail. But Elena believed in him. She always had. When Daniel's business finally took off, it felt like their struggles had been worth it. His rise to wealth was meteoric, and soon their modest life was replaced by one of luxury. The couple celebrated his success together, reveling in the idea that they had both earned this victory. They got married in a small, intimate ceremony, more focused on their love than on the trappings of Daniel's newfound wealth. For a time, it seemed like the dream they had fought so hard for had come true. But as Daniel's empire grew, so did the demands on his time. Late nights at the office turned into endless weeks of meetings, business trips, and networking events. Daniel's world began revolving around his high-status clientele and the ever-growing pressures of staying at the top. Slowly, their once strong connection began to weaken. Elena noticed the changes before Daniel did. Their evenings, once filled with laughter and intimate conversations, now felt like lonely silences, punctuated by Daniel's distracted glances at his phone. Elena tried to adapt at first, brushing off her feelings of neglect. She told herself it was just a phase, that the man she loved would eventually make time for her again. But as months turned into years, the distance between them grew wider. Daniel's obsession with his public image and his company's reputation became all-consuming. He became more polished, more calculated, wanted, less the man Elena had fallen in love with, and more a version of himself tailored for high society. Elena's resentment grew quietly, a slow simmer that she tried to keep buried. She hated the way Daniel prioritized work over their relationship, but she hated even more the way he didn't seem to notice. She watched as he charmed investors and mingled effortlessly with celebrities, his smile genuine only when it wasn't directed at her. She started to wonder if she had any place in his new life or if she was merely a remnant of his old one, a relic of a time he had outgrown. Despite her feelings, Elena didn't voice her frustrations. She didn't want to seem ungrateful or unsupportive, so she bit her tongue and hoped things would change. But the man who used to share everything with her now felt like a stranger in their home. When they did talk, it was about surface-level things, upcoming meetings, financial milestones, or polite inquiries about her day. The intimacy they once had seemed like a distant memory. Amelia arrived in Daniel's life as a bright, ambitious employee in his company. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with a confidence that drew people to her effortlessly. At first, she was just another face in the office, but her quick wit and keen business sense soon made her stand out. Daniel noticed her sharp mind and began assigning her to more significant projects. Over time, she became a fixture in his daily life, attending meetings, accompanying him on business trips, and earning his trust. Amelia was clever. She never openly disrespected Elena or made her intentions obvious. Instead, she positioned herself as a trusted colleague, someone Daniel could rely on during his increasingly hectic days. She flattered him subtly, always saying just enough to make him feel admired but never crossing professional boundaries, at least not at first. Elena noticed the shift almost immediately. Daniel started mentioning Amelia more often, praising her insights and her value to the company. It wasn't just the words that bothered Elena. It was the way he said them, with a spark of admiration in his voice that she hadn't heard in years. For the first time, Elena felt something she hadn't before: jealousy. The cracks in their marriage deepened when a business deal went wrong. Daniel, under immense pressure, brought the stress home, and Elena became the target of his frustration. Amelia, seeing an opportunity, subtly planted seeds of doubt in Daniel's mind. She framed Elena's concerns as a lack of support, twisting their arguments into something far worse than they were. The breaking point came on their 6th wedding anniversary. Elena had planned a quiet dinner at home, just the two of them. She'd cooked his favorite meal, lit candles, and even put on the dress he used to say made her look like a movie star. She was determined to salvage what was left of their marriage, to remind Daniel of what they once had. But Daniel never showed up. When he finally walked through the door hours later, he was dressed in a sleek suit, smelling of champagne and cologne. "You missed our anniversary," Elena said quietly, her voice trembling. Daniel barely looked at her. "I told you I had an event tonight. It's not like I could skip it." Her jaw tightened. "An event or just another excuse to spend the night with Amelia?" That got his attention. He froze, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell is that supposed to mean? It all came spilling out then. Her anger, her frustration, her heartbreak. She accused him of neglecting her, of putting Amelia and his company above their marriage. Daniel fired back, defensive and exhausted. "I've built all of this for us, Elena. Everything I've done has been for you." "No," she shot back, tears streaming down her face. "You built this for yourself, and now you don't even see me anymore." The argument spiraled out of control. Daniel accused her of being ungrateful, of not understanding the pressures he was under. Elena accused him of forgetting the promises he'd made, of letting her fade into the background while he chased his ambitions. By the end of the fight, Elena was shaking. She couldn't do it anymore. She packed a small bag, hoping, praying, that Daniel would stop her, would fight for her. But he didn't. He just stood there, stone-faced, as she walked out the door. That night, as Elena cried herself to sleep in a hotel room, Daniel sat in their empty kitchen, staring at the cold dinner she'd left behind. Somewhere deep down he knew he'd made a mistake, but he was too proud, too stubborn to admit it, and that was when Amelia struck. She was there for Daniel in a way Elena no longer could be: strategic, supportive, and always available. She whispered all the things Daniel wanted to hear, that Elena had been holding him back, that he needed someone who truly understood his world. Daniel believed her. The argument left him questioning whether his marriage was holding him back. Elena, tired of fighting for a man who no longer seemed to want her, didn't resist when he brought up divorce. She quietly signed the papers, packed her things, and left without a word about the life growing growing inside her. 6 months after the divorce, Daniel Carter is at the pinnacle of his public life. His wedding reception to Amelia, held at one of the city's most luxurious venues, is the event of the season. The grand ballroom sparkles with chandeliers, their crystal prisms scattering light across a room filled with the city's elite, celebrities, influential business people, and politicians. The guests are impeccably dressed, the atmosphere brimming with champagne-fueled laughter and admiration for the glamorous couple. Daniel stands by Amelia, his tailored suit accentuating his commanding presence, while Amelia, in a sleek designer gown, basks in the attention. Together they look like the perfect power couple, wealthy, beautiful, and untouchable. Yet despite the smiles and accolades, Daniel feels an unshakable hollowness, a gnawing sense that something is missing. He dismisses the thought, attributing it to exhaustion and the weight of public expectations. As the evening progresses, Daniel's polished mask begins to slip. While Amelia mingles with the guests, Daniel steps away for a moment of solitude, surveying the room from the shadows near the bar. That's when he notices a server moving quietly among the tables, clearing plates and refilling drinks. Her face is partially obscured, her uniform plain and unremarkable, but something about her movements catches his attention. As she turns slightly, a shaft of light falls on her face, and Daniel's heart stops. It's Elena. She looks older, her face paler and thinner, but there is no mistaking her. For a moment, the world around him seems to freeze. He stares, disbelief etched into his features, as memories of their life together rush back. Her laughter, her quiet strength, the way she had always believed in him. But it's not just the shock of seeing her that leaves him breathless. She's pregnant, her rounded belly unmistakable beneath the loose-fitting uniform. His mind races, piecing together fragments of the past. She hadn't said anything about being pregnant during the divorce. Why is she here? Why hasn't she told him? Unable to stay silent, Daniel moves across the room, weaving through the crowd until he's standing in front of her. Elena freezes when she sees him, her face a mixture of surprise and dread. Her hands tighten around the tray she's holding, but she doesn't say a word. Elena, what are you doing here? Elena's eyes flicker with a mix of emotions. She squares her shoulders, refusing to let herself appear weak. I'm working, she replies curtly. What does it look like? Daniel's gaze drops to her stomach, and his voice trembles with barely contained anger and confusion. You're pregnant. Elena doesn't respond, her silence answering more than words ever could. Daniel's mind reels. His emotions are a chaotic swirl of guilt, anger, and something deeper, an ache he doesn't know how to name. I need to talk to you, he says. Not here, somewhere private. No, Elena says firmly, her voice steady despite tears threatening to spill. You don't get to do this now, Daniel. You don't get to ask questions after everything. Daniel flinches at her words, guilt tightening his chest. Before he can respond, Elena brushes past him, determined to finish her work and avoid a scene. Daniel's encounter with Elena doesn't go unnoticed. Across the room, Amelia watches their exchange, her sharp instincts immediately sensing trouble. Her polished smile falters as she excuses herself from a conversation and heads toward Daniel. What's going on? Who is she? Daniel hesitates. She's, an old friend, his voice unconvincing. Amelia's eyes narrow as she looks at him, then at Elena, who is now clearing another table. Really? Because it looked like more than that. Daniel doesn't respond, and the silence speaks volumes. Amelia's gaze darkens, but she doesn't press further, instead making a mental note to confront him later. She grabs his arm, pulling him back toward the center of the reception. We have guests waiting, she says with a tight smile, her grip on him unyielding. Later in the evening, unable to let it go, Daniel finds Elena in a quiet corridor near the kitchen. She's wiping down a tray, her movements slow and deliberate. She doesn't look up when he approaches. Elena, she exhales. What do you want, Daniel? I need to know, he says, his voice almost pleading. Is it mine? Elena hesitates. For a moment, she considers lying, protecting herself from the inevitable chaos his involvement will bring. But something in his voice, something raw and desperate, makes her stop. Yes, she says finally, it's yours. The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. He steps back, running a hand through his hair as he processes the revelation. Why didn't you tell me? He asks, his tone a mix of anger and hurt. Elena meets his gaze, her eyes flashing with defiance. Because you didn't care, she says sharply. You were so busy building your empire and running off with her that you didn't even look back. I wasn't going to beg for your attention, Daniel. Her words cut deep, and Daniel struggles to respond. Before he can, the sound of heels clicking against the floor interrupts them. Amelia appears, her expression a mask of composure, though her eyes betray her growing fury. "What's going on here?" she asks, her voice sharp. Elena straightens, her expression turning cold. "Nothing," she says simply, brushing past them and disappearing down the hall. Amelia turns to Daniel, her lips pressed into a thin line. "We need to talk," she says, pulling him away. Daniel follows reluctantly, his mind consumed by Elena's revelation. The reception continues, but Daniel is no longer present in the moment. His thoughts are consumed by Elena and the baby, and the weight of his choices presses down on him as he stands beside Amelia, smiling for photos and toasting with guests. He can't shake the image of Elena. She wasn't the vibrant, laughing woman he remembered, and that belly, the undeniable proof that she was carrying his child, made his carefully constructed narrative of self-denial crumble to dust. Daniel couldn't stay away. It took some effort to track her down. He had to use a contact at the hotel to find her employment records, but eventually he discovered her address. When he arrived at her apartment building, it was late evening. The neighborhood was modest but clean, the kind of place Elena never would have had to live in when they were together. He hesitated in front of her door, unsure if he even had the right to be here, but the image of her swollen belly haunted him. She was carrying his child, and he had done nothing to help her. Finally, he nodded. Elena opened the door after a moment, and her expression instantly hardened. She looked at him like he was the last person on earth she wanted to see. "What are you doing here?" she asked flatly. Daniel held up the grocery bags in his hands. "I brought you something. Groceries." Elena crossed her arms, blocking the doorway. "I don't need your help, Daniel." "I know you don't need it, but I want to help anyway." She stared at him for a moment, her jaw tight, before stepping aside to let him in. The apartment was small, but tidy. There were signs of a life in progress, a stack of baby clothes folded neatly on the couch, a crib in the corner, an ultrasound picture pinned to the fridge. Daniel's chest tightened as he took it all in. She was doing this alone. "Nice place," he said awkwardly, setting the bags down on the kitchen counter. Elena gave a humorless laugh. "It's not the penthouse, but I make do." He turned to face her, his voice soft. "Elena, don't," she cut him off sharply. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. You don't get to just walk back into my life because you feel guilty." "It's not guilt," Daniel insisted, stepping closer. "I know I messed up, Elena. I know I failed you, but I want to make it right. I want to be here for you and the baby." Her laugh this time was bitter. "You want to be here now? After all this time? After I've spent months trying to scrape together a life for myself and this child while you were off living your perfect little life?" "It's not perfect," he said quietly. She shook her head, turning away from him. "I don't need your help, Daniel. I've already learned how to live without you." He didn't push her further that night, but before he left, he said one thing. "I know you don't trust me, and I don't blame you, but I'm not giving up this time." Daniel kept his word. He started showing up regularly, always unannounced, always with something in hand. Sometimes it was groceries, sometimes baby clothes, sometimes takeout from her favorite restaurant. He didn't push her to talk, didn't force his way in. He simply showed up. At first, Elena resented it. She hated that he thought he could fix things with small gestures. She hated that he made her heart flutter when he smiled at her, that a part of her wanted to believe him. But over time, his persistence started to wear her down. He wasn't just throwing money at her problems. He was showing up, time and time again, quietly proving that he was serious. One afternoon, Daniel knocked on her door and handed her a folder. "What's this?" she asked warily. "I signed up for parenting classes," he said. Elena stared at him, her eyebrows raising in disbelief. "I want to be ready," he continued. "I want to do this right, for the baby, for you." She didn't know what to say. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the Daniel she used to know, the one who brought her sunflowers and made her laugh until her cheeks hurt. The turning point came during a doctor's appointment. Elena had reluctantly agreed to let Daniel come along after weeks of him asking. When the ultrasound technician turned on the monitor, Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room, fast and steady. He stared at the screen, his eyes wide with wonder. That's the baby?" he whispered. Elena glanced at him and saw something she hadn't expected. Tears in his eyes. "That's our baby," she corrected softly. He reached out instinctively, his hand brushing hers, but she pulled away. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you, Daniel," she said. He nodded, wiping his eyes. "I know, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to be here." One evening, as they sat on the couch folding baby clothes, Elena finally spoke spoke the words she'd been holding back. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again," she admitted. Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "I'll spend the rest of my life earning that trust, if that's what it takes." Elena didn't respond, but she felt a tiny flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he meant it. As Elena's due date approached, Daniel became more involved. He wasn't perfect. There were moments when his instincts to take control clashed with Elena's hard-earned independence, but he was trying. One night, as he helped her set up the crib, she caught him staring at her. "What?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're incredible," he said simply. Elena rolled her eyes but couldn't hide the small smile tugging at her lips. As Daniel spent more time with Elena, memories of their marriage came flooding back. He started noticing cracks in the story Amelia had spun, the things she'd said about Elena's unhappiness, the way their relationship had unraveled so suddenly. It didn't sit right. Then one day, while reviewing old company files, he stumbled across an old email chain involving Amelia and one of his former assistants. Something about it gnawed at him. Why had this assistant suddenly quit after he and Elena had separated? Daniel decided to track them down. The former assistant, reluctant at first, eventually confessed everything. She didn't like Elena. She used to say things like how Elena didn't fit into your world or how she was holding you back. And she wasn't shy about it either. She made it pretty clear to everyone around her that she wanted you for herself. Daniel Dew felt a chill run down his spine. The assistant continued, their voice growing more confident as the floodgates opened. "Amelia had me intercept emails and messages from Elena to you. She said it was for your own good, that you didn't need distractions while you were working. And there was that one letter." "What letter?" Daniel asked sharply. The assistant swallowed hard. "Elena wrote you this long, emotional letter. I don't know exactly what was in it, but Amelia told me to make sure it never got to you." Daniel's fists clenched under the table. "I didn't want to do it, but Amelia was intimidating. She had a way of making people do what she wanted, and I needed the job." They handed Daniel a thumb drive. "I saved a few things just in case. Emails, memos. I don't know if it's enough, but it might help." Daniel took the drive, his mind spinning. Back at his penthouse, Daniel plugged the drive into his laptop. The evidence was damning. Emails from Amelia explicitly outlining her plans to drive a wedge between him and Elena, messages bragging about how she'd intercepted communications. He confronted Amelia that evening. She was sitting in their living room, sipping wine and scrolling through her phone. "We need to talk," he said, his voice cold. Amelia glanced up, frowning. "What's wrong, Greg?" He set his laptop on the coffee table and hit play. Her own voice filled the room, laughing, as she talked about how easy it had been to manipulate him. Amelia's face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she demanded, standing up. "It doesn't matter," Daniel said, his tone icy. "What matters is that I know the truth. You lied to me, Amelia. You manipulated me. You destroyed my marriage." She scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh, please, I didn't destroy anything. You and Elena were already falling apart. I just gave you a little push." "A little push?" Daniel's voice rose. "You intercepted her letters. You fed me lies about her. You sabotaged everything." Amelia's mask slipped. Her eyes narrowed, her voice dripping with venom. "You're welcome, by the way. Elena was a nobody, Daniel. She didn't understand you, didn't belong in your world. I made you who you are today. If it weren't for me, you'd still be stuck with her, wasting your potential." Daniel stared at her, disgusted. "You didn't make me. You ruined me." He turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, seething. The next morning, Daniel presented the evidence to the board of directors. The emails, the recording, and testimony from the former assistant painted a damning picture. The board, disgusted by Amelia's actions, voted to remove her from her position. She was stripped of her shares and forced out of the company. During their divorce proceedings, Amelia attempted to claim half of Daniel's wealth and significant shares in the company, but Daniel's legal team countered with the evidence of her fraud and manipulation. The judge ruled overwhelmingly in Daniel's favor, leaving Amelia with a fraction of what she'd demanded. Her public reputation took a devastating hit when the story leaked to the press, painting her as a conniving social climber who'd destroyed Daniel's first marriage. Her glamorous life crumbled. Amelia's final scene is one of desperation and humiliation, alone in her cold, empty apartment, scrolling through news articles tarnishing her name. She reaches for her phone to call someone, anyone, but no one answers. With Amelia gone, Daniel turned his focus back to Elena and the baby. He'd stepped back from his company, choosing instead to focus on rebuilding the parts of his life he'd neglected for so long. One quiet evening, he arrived arrived at Elena's apartment. She opened the door, holding their newborn in her arms. Her face was tired but radiant, her hair pulled into a messy bun. Daniel stood there, speechless for a moment. "What are you doing here, Daniel?" she asked, her tone softer than before. I wanted to see both of you," he said, his voice breaking. Daniel sat on the couch carefully, cradling the baby in his arms for the first time. Tears welled in his eyes as he looked down at his child, this tiny life he was now responsible for. Elena leaned against the doorway, her expression guarded, but not unkind. "You have a lot to prove, Daniel, but for their sake, I'll give you the chance." The story ends with Daniel sitting on the couch, holding his child, while Elena watches from the doorway. The three of them are far from a perfect family, but there's a glimmer of hope, a promise of redemption, and the possibility of a better future.